In a world of business complexity, execution is everything. This is JD and the Brain, where failure was not an option and performance isn't accidental. Let's get to work.
All righty. Welcome back to JD and the Brain, the practice of business where leadership theory meets operational reality. Today is a significant milestone for JD and me because this is the final episode of season 1. As we bring this first season to a close, it's worth looking back at the ground we've covered. So we began with support, the first element in the STAMP framework, where we explored the leads continuum and the different ways leaders support their people, from leader to educator, administrator, delegator, and ultimately a screener as people develop greater capability and independence. Then we move to the teamwork phase and our train model, which we are involved now. So we want human resources and leaders to teach, review, assist, involve, and today we're going to talk about nominate. We've talked throughout this season about leadership as something much more than simply directing work. Leadership is developmental. We teach people, we review their progress, we assist them when needed, we involve them increasingly in the work and the decisions around them. But eventually, there has to be a next step. And that's why nominate is such an important and an appropriate phase to talk about to end season 1. Leadership isn't just about getting good performance from people where they are today. It's about intentionally preparing them for where they could be tomorrow. That might mean a promotion. It might mean a developmental assignment, greater responsibility, increased visibility, or simply, putting someone's name forward when an opportunity becomes available. Our guest today understands that responsibility from experience. Dr. Jose G. Cardenas is a retired U.S. Army finance officer who served the country for over 24 years. We met overseas, and we'll get into all that stuff later. He began his career in the enlisted ranks and ultimately retired as a major, serving in increasingly responsible leadership positions while developing and mentoring soldiers, officers, and teams in very complex organizations and operational environments in wartime often. So, Jose, welcome. So this is kind of the CEO's stamp of approval. So the end of season 1 will be, how we lead and how we place. So we are now here at Nominate. So just by way of a review, the first step in the stamp of approval is kind of how we lead as an organization and as leaders. And we have what's called the leads continuum. So the leader says, do as I say. The educator says, do as I say, but here's a reason why. The administrator, the root word is minister. How can I help you? The delegator, you're on your own. I'll check back later. And then the screener, what's in your way? How can I buffet noise so that you can do your job? So that's kind of the foundation of the stamp of approval. And then as we move into teamwork and the role of human resources and in the role of staff development, we want to teach and tell people at orientation, onboarding, give them what they need to know. Then we want to review with them on the job. Hey, remember 3 months ago in orientation, we talked about this. How can I help you? Minister, they assist. Delegators, they involve people, and then ultimately when people show responsibility, we can give them an opportunity to be nominated for promotion. So let me.
Love it. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes. Thank you, sir. So again, welcome, Jose. Jose holds a doctorate in business administration, an MBA, and a master's degree in U.S. history. Today, he serves as the chief tax strategist and wealth advisor for the C&R Group, LLC, where he helps individuals and professionals and business owners strengthen their financial positions, reduce risk, and build sustainable wealth. But what particularly caught our attention and makes Jose such a natural fit for this conversation is his philosophy of leadership. Develop people before positions become available. Think about that for a moment. Too often, organizations wait until a position opens and then we start saying, who's ready?
Right.
Jose's philosophy turns that around. Our responsibility as leaders is to make people ready before the opportunity arrives. That means developing capability, building confidence, transferring institutional knowledge, creating accountability, and intentionally exposing emerging leaders to experiences that help prepare them for greater responsibility. That's what the N in the train model, Nominate, is all about. Who are we teaching? Who are we stretching? Who are we allowing to make decisions? Who are we putting in front of the room? Who are we giving visibility to? And when an opportunity finally presents itself, whose name are we willing to put forward? Because ultimately, good leadership shouldn't simply produce good performance, and it shouldn't simply produce good followers. Good leadership should prepare the next generation of leaders. So today, as we close out teamwork, the train model, and season 1 of JD and the Brain, we're going to talk about promotion, advancement, succession, mentorship, and the leader's responsibility to prepare people for opportunities that may not even exist yet. Dr. Jose, welcome to JD and the Brain.
Whoop.
Let's talk about Nominate. Whoop, whoop.
Absolutely. Thank you for
How are
having
you,
me
sir?
here. I
How are
appreciate it.
you? How has your week been? Have you been busy?
I've been running. Every week it's like drinking from a fire hose, it seems. And it's like last night it was my daughter's celebration because her partner finished her training certification to become a licensed therapist. So we
Wow.
were doing that last night and then had to drive back down and had a meeting at 8:00 this morning. And, before that, I was a little bit too much information. I know, I'm sorry, but I had to feed the chickens and the dogs and, all the husband responsibilities that come along with that. So, very full life so far. Thank God. I'm grateful for that. So,
Well, Jose, this is my partner, JD Cecilia. He was my boss actually when I was over in Kandahar and Kabul with you. So,
perfect.
yeah, excellent.
Many shared experiences.
Hey, I must not have screwed up too bad because Tim turned out pretty nice, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Apparently. Good mentorship.
Yeah. That's
So-
we'll just leave it at that. Yeah.
So tell JD where we met and all that and how we came to know one another, and that'll help the audience kind of understand.
No, yeah, absolutely. So I was in Afghanistan and Kabul back in 2013 to 2014. And so part of the Army's progression of developing people, they offered the Lean Six Sigma program. And so I jumped on that right away, right? And so that's how Tim and I met. And so I took the course and I got certified. And as part of the process, we had to create a project and implement it real time, which was kind of scary, to be completely honest, because here's this junior captain guy running around with all these colonels and above, and now I got to create a project and sell it to them of how we're going to improve operations in real time in the theater, right? Well, all this other stuff's going on, and so that's how we met, and I implemented this project. It turned out to be very successful, and after I left, that's one of those things that I was able to leave the organization and leave in place to make operations more efficient. And so the lessons learned from not only that project, but the class, and then with Tim's mentorship, I was able to, as I moved on to other assignments, I was able to make changes and help restructure the organizations to be more efficient.
All right. So JD is our professional question asker. So I'm going to turn it over to him and enjoy the conversation. And I may pop in here or there. So again, Dr. Jose, welcome. We are glad you're here. So proud of you and your efforts and how you've grown, and been watching you on LinkedIn, and you're just crushing it, sir. And I just wanted to get you on JD and the Brain and learn from you, sir. So over to you, JD.
Thank you.
All
I
right.
appreciate
Thank
it.
you, Tim. Listen, it's going to be an interesting conversation this morning. One of the first things I want to do is I want to get to the why. In your lead in, you started off as an enlisted soldier and then transitioned to the officer corps. So the first question I always like to find out is, what was the why behind you joining the military, and what was the why behind you transitioning to the officer corps? After that, we'll talk more about your philosophy on preparing people for greater responsibilities. But I'd like to kind of get that down because they're always interesting stories to hear that.
No, yes, absolutely. So the why is ever since I was a child, I was playing with little soldiers and had GI Joes and all that stuff, right? And so I had a brain for that type of thing. And so there's two things I wanted to do, right? I either wanted to be a fighter pilot or a priest, which are completely opposite, unless you become a chaplain, I guess. But that was always there. And then after I got to high school, I joined the Air Force JROTC program there, and I really enjoyed that. And then I always wondered about the military service. And so I didn't go to the Air Force. I went into the Navy for 8 years. And then after that, I transitioned to the Army. But I always had the desire to serve. I always had the desire to protect my country if needed. That was a great way for me to improve myself, learn some skills. I became an aircraft engine mechanic as my enlisted tour. And then why did I transition into the officer corps is because I pretty much tapped out, right? As far as, and I don't mean there was no opportunity in the Navy, there was great opportunity, but I felt like that I had more to give and I had more to learn. And so the only way that I could, again, start shaping people, right? Which I didn't know that's what I was eventually going to be doing. But early on in my career, I was selected, looking back, to always be teaching people and always be helping them. And for some reason, I was always the guy that was getting pulled out to go help somebody. And so with that shaped my mentality of, hey, this is not only a job of helping, shaping people, but you have to learn more. And there's a certain point in leadership to where in order for you to give it your best, you have to move on. And so it just happened to coincide with that's when 9/11 happened. It was about a year later that I left the Navy because I was out to sea. And that's when I transitioned. And I said, okay, well, now I want to get a little bit more involved. And so what am I going to do? Okay, well, the Army, it's definitely going to be about as involved as you can get on the ground. And that's what I decided to do, right? And so I applied to the Army ROTC program at Boise State. That's where I ended up getting my master's degree in history, went through that leadership track and eventually became a artillery officer. And then halfway through that, about year 8, so I have to have this pattern of 8s apparently. So 8 years in the Navy, 8 years in the artillery, and then the rest of my career, I transitioned into the finance corps. And again, I love the artillery, but I felt like there was a cap. Okay. Right. And so that's why I transitioned over to finance. And once I opened that door, this entire new world opened up because now, again, not only am I a leader at some level, but now I have units sending me their soldiers with their financial concerns and their questions and their problems. And I was not trained to be a financial advisor. Right. So I was trained on how to manage the Army's budget, how to spend it legally, and how to project a budget. That was it. And coach and mentor people. But because of this other element of people sending me soldiers, I had to learn on my own about more advanced financial techniques and taxes and helping them answer their questions. And so there was two parallels going at the same time. I was doing the Army finance thing and I was doing the personal financial services track, if you will. And so when I retired, it was just a natural transition into this field because I was already doing it for 8 years. And it's just been every day I'm learning something and dealing with people's different situations and scenarios and what they want to do with estate planning and saving on taxes or eliminating taxes. And, the very complex world of corporate structures and taxes related to those different entities. And how do you, at the end of the day, is how you do build a legacy and leave it for your family to enjoy while minimizing the impact of the government in your pocket.
Well, thank you for that. The reason I brought that up is I knew we had a unicorn, Tim, when we started talking here, because having done a couple of decades in the service myself, it's very rare. First of all, there's a couple of real anomalies in his story. First, it's very rare. I mean, it's not completely impossible, but it's rare that people make a transition after 8 years of enlisted into the officer corps. So that's the first kind of cut. The second cut is it's even more rare that they would go from one service to another. That's the second rare. And then the third is going from artillery to finance. So those are three really unique things that don't happen very often. I bet you couldn't find too many other examples that mapped to the same track that you were on. So the reason I bring that up is that definitely, as you mentioned it, has a big influence on your philosophy because you've experienced different services, different positions from enlisted to officer, and different MOS, different military occupational skills. So a lot of change, a lot of variation in your experiences has really provided a rich background for you to do the following question. And that is, I've sat through many promotion ceremonies, and one of the lines I'm sure you'll recognize is that the people in the service are not promoted to do the next job only after they've demonstrated the ability to perform at the next level. Knowing that that's the service position on how promotions are determined, how did you, based on all of your background, help people get ready so that they could demonstrate proficiency and ability at the next higher level?
So looking at the being slated into a certain position, right? I always looked at what am I lacking? What am I not? What do I not know? And turn around immediately and start building something that'll help answer those questions. And so that is, if you have to put me in a corner and ask me what the one thing is, that I would say that's the starting point for developing people, right? Is what are the current gaps that are in the system, and then start developing a way forward to fill those gaps to ensure that that position, it's not about you, but if that position is ready to go at moment's notice because of the nature of our job or the job at that point in time. And so that's how I started approaching everything. And if I knew that somebody, as soon as I got my hands on somebody, I started coaching and mentoring and developing those guardrails to help them be successful into whatever they wanted to do, whether it was coming up for promotion or even if it was transitioning back into civilian life, right? And so that is the starting point of how I started to develop people and getting them ready for promotion and getting them knowledgeable enough to show not only competence, but confidence, right? And so that's how I approached that lens to help them get ready because you need to be ready today, not tomorrow.
So this is a follow-on question to that, which probably you answered part of it already. But isn't in the military, there's always this track of progressive responsibilities, and oftentimes they're tied to length of service and previous positions before you become eligible for them. So, without appearing to be a ticket puncher, how do you prepare individuals so that they're ready for a job that may not be available for another couple of years? And I think you answered part of it already, but I'd like to hear the rest of it.
No, yeah, absolutely. So time flies very fast, right? That's the first thing that's our most important resource, period. It's not money, it's time. Okay. And so helping that individual wherever they're at mentally and emotionally realize that was the first thing I tried to inculcate into that person. Okay. And so working backwards, it's not taking a look at, I have to wait 2, 3 years or whatever. It's like, no, you only have, if you're lucky, you only have 2 years, okay? Because things change rapidly. So we need to start getting you ready now. And these are the things these are the assignments, the duties, the positions for scenarios that you're going to be thrown into. And let's start getting ready for that now. And so that's how I try to approach training somebody and getting them ready for promotion. And you have to realize that's your entire job, okay? Is people skills, helping people and making sure that they're ready to go if needed to tomorrow. That may not be the longest amount of time, 24 hours, but hey, it's more than you knew yesterday. And so continuing to push them and develop them towards that successful outcome is what's important. But you have to realize that as a leader. You're not just, I've seen some leaders kind of kick back and they'll figure it out. And they're kind of pensive and then they get upset when the individual's not performing. Well, did you take the time from day one to shape them?
As I'm listening to you talk, the word introspection just pops into my mind. Is that if we want to position ourselves in order to be promoted or to have an advancement opportunity, we have to be honest with ourselves and introspective. And then you, as a mentor, you have to partner with them to help them be introspective. So that was pretty fascinating. And then the second term that jumped out at me is perspective. I have two words that I say instead of two other words, and it's changed my whole perspective on life. And so there's sort of a blend of the introspection and the perspective with these two words. And those two words are have to versus get to. If I have to go to work, no, I'm alive, I'm healthy, I'm happy, I've got a family, I get to go to work.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that has changed my perspective on all things. So I really appreciate, your heart there and helping people be introspective and to understand perspective.
Yeah, the other thing that jumped out at me, Jose, was the first part of your answer, and that time flies. It is amazing how fast 20 years will go by, particularly since as you mentioned, you move every couple of years or you're into a different job every couple of years. And so time just, for me, my 20 plus years just flew by. I look back on it now and I go, wow, that seemed like yesterday. What happened all those years in between? And so that leads me to the next part of a question about promotions and ready for the next position of higher and greater responsibility. And that, as you know, in the military, it's a pyramid where you require less and less officers at the senior ranks. And so there has to be a pretty good cut line between who should be there and who is maxed out at their current level of performance and ability. So as a leader, when you're looking at some of your junior leaders in your area, how do you distinguish between the ones that have like peaked out, so to speak, and those that are ready for greater responsibility?
Their desire, right? And by that I mean, are they coachable? Are they willing to learn? Are they actively seeking positions of greater responsibility, but those roles that are going to help them shape? And as you're coaching them and the types of questions that they're asking and how that developmental or counseling session is going, you are able to pick out whether that person is ready or not. And then if they're not ready, your responsibility as a coach is to tell them, hey, this is where we're short. And you have to tell them, hey, it's not personal. This is about helping you versus a personal attack. Okay. And I think if you have those guardrails in place, you are able to have very open conversations with somebody. And sometimes people are not ready. They will tell you, like, I don't want to command. Okay. That's great. Let's put you on another track. Because you only have two jobs in the military, at least in the officer ranks. You're either commanding or on staff, right? You know that. And so if you have a guy that's flat out telling you, I don't like the elements of command and everything that's associated with, but he still has a value, he or she still have value. Okay, I completely get that. Let's look, if you still want to serve, that's why there's all these other tracks that we can help you with, right? And it doesn't make him a bad person. It's just that's where that individual person is starting to come out and develop. Now you got people that are out there that are hungry, right? And that's all they want to do is command or be in a leadership position like that. That's great too. But it starts with those early counseling conversations and shaping them. And I mean, that's why by the time you're a captain, it's pretty much well written what that person wants to do, because they've been around long enough to have answered that question for themselves. What do you truly want to do? Okay. And so there's avenues for both. And our job is to make sure that they're ready, whatever that next transition is going to be. Because as you know, life is a continuing transition, whether it's 24 months, could be a month from now, God knows what's going to happen tomorrow. So it's just about getting them ready, having the honest conversation, and helping the organization grow while helping the individual get to where they need to be.
How have you used those skills post-military in helping coworkers and others develop? How has that transitioned into civilian life?
So using that same framework, right? It catches people off guard because they either have had something similar or it's completely new to them, right? Which tells us that depending on the company and where they're at, leadership is not necessarily paying attention to those things. They're focused more on operations and hitting targets, which are important. Okay, the business of a business is to stay in business. However, how are you shoring up that structure that's going to keep you in business, right? And how are you going to just chase the dollar, or are you going to actually build an organization that builds value for both the customer and the employee? And that's where we do fall short in some corporations.
So I know you can relate to this, and Tim, you probably are as well, but in everything in the military is measured. I mean, you are measured in almost every aspect of your life. And it's good that they do that because they have to make hard decisions at some point about who should be the next person to get promoted, et cetera. So your height, your weight, your body fat, your run score, your PTs, your physical fitness, push-ups, sit-ups, running. I don't even know what the standards are now, but they were decent standards to meet. Your marksmanship, your civilian education, military education, schools you've attended, all that stuff gets factored in. So it's a competitive arena. I mean, they want to know who the best are. So my question is, and I have my philosophy as well, but I mean, how did you create an atmosphere, an environment where competition, which is what they're in, was healthy as opposed to unhealthy? And how did that help you decide who was ready for promotion and who wasn't?
Yeah, so it is a very tight line, like you said, right? Especially the higher you progress. And so it's based on performance. Okay. That's what you or that's what I nail it down to. Okay. The Army or the military has spent all these years and time and money and effort into shaping you. And are you meeting that standard? And are you meeting is your performance indicative of meeting and exceeding those standards? And I believe that's how you continue to progress in your career. Unfortunately, Mama said, no, you're done at 24 years, but I would have stayed until the day I died, because I love being a soldier. I do. I live right next to Fort Sill. My wife, for some reason, decided that she loved this place, and this is where we retired. And so I get to hear the sound of freedom every other day in my backyard, and it shakes the house, when those artillery shells hit. But I love it. But yeah, I mean, are you hitting the performance metrics that are required of your position? Are you exceeding them? And like you said, there's so many elements that go into being selected for the next level that if you were to take that person and put them out in the civilian world, they're going to be extremely successful, right? They may not have that 350 PT score or 300 or whatever it may be now, but they're going to do very well when you put them against somebody else in a similar position because they have not received the proper attention or grooming that some people receive in the military.
So I want to just say I appreciate your heart. Where does that come from? What take us back 30 years and when you were younger, and what was that process, to want to serve your country and protect people? Where did that come? Where was the fire in the belly kind of thing?
Okay, so this is gonna sound like hokey, I guess, but I guess my mom, because I lost my father at an early age, around 7 or 8, and the only thing my mom had to hold on to at that time was the church, Catholic Church. And so I guess that's where that I either wanted to be a priest or a fighter pilot thing came from. But yeah, it was just being around people with the same philosophy and having a culture of helping others and sharing what you had and helping to help people go through whatever challenges they were going through. And I always had that little voice in the back of my mind. Like I said, I love uniforms and I love the military, and that's what I wanted to do. But your job is to help people.
I lost my dad when I was 14. So it was, my mom used to say, it's me and you against the world.
Yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And that definitely was the foundation for me, which ultimately led me to go to Bible college,
Right.
in 1980. And so, I mean, I share that with you. Thank you for sharing your heart. I mean, we can see it in you, we hear it in you, and I just thought the audience should know, what that foundation was.
No, I still think about becoming a deacon, right? I really do, even to this day. So, I mean, there's time for me to turn to the right path, I guess. But yeah, no. So I just do a lot of personal self-development and read a lot. But yeah, that's where it comes from. It's that early childhood and seeing my mom go through those challenges and a lot of other people, and then just having a culture of helping, and you take that with you. Those early childhood experiences are what shape you, and it just happened to fit perfectly with military service.
Our final question, Jose, really comes about looking for the future. And that is that, as you mentioned, we all recognize that, you don't stay in these positions forever. You rotate out every couple of years. But what's important is that the organization that you are leaving is prepared without you. So if you could
Yes.
give leaders today some practical advice on setting up a framework for a succession. In other words, the person that comes in behind you, or the subordinates that are going to be there after you leave, what advice would you give them as far as saying, what should you start doing immediately? What would be your advice to them?
So you need to start assessing your environment immediately from day one. You step into that office. Okay. Being in the military, obviously, it's part of our nature. However, for the outside world, I would say that it may sound a little bit counterintuitive of getting ready to be replaced, but at the end of the day, that's what you have to do, right? Because you're not going to be there forever. At one point in time, depending on your level, you are going to decide to transition or you're going to decide to retire, right? And so, depending on that leadership level, that's how you should approach things. And what are those gaps? Okay, take the first 90 days, again, borrowing from the Army, but take that first initial period to find out what those gaps are and start creating systems that are going to get rid of those gaps. Start having conversations with your team to assess where they're at, where they need to be developed, and then start implementing those things that you can, because I know resources are kind of constrained depending on the business. But what can you do? Not everything is required for money. You are giving the most valuable thing that you can, which is your own personal time. So do you need to make that investment? Okay. And just sit down with people and then, hey, this is what I see. This is where I want to go. This is where the organization wants to go. How do we marry those two up? Okay. And so it may not always be money. It may be just having a conversation one-on-one with your team individually, and then sitting them all together and say, hey, gang, this is how we're going to move forward. But it doesn't always have to be about money. It's important, but it doesn't have to be about money. It's your personal investment into people. And that's what moves the football down the road, down the goal.
And I had a very similar philosophy. I summed it up, and I want to leave my organization better than the one I inherited. And
Exactly.
it goes back to first assessing your environment. What are the key things that make this organization run? What are the key missions that they have performed? And whatever aspect of that, I try to improve it. It's exactly what you're talking about, is always be looking when you leave, like you said, working for your replacement, better than the one you got. And so that's awesome. Appreciate that. And Tim, that's going to wrap up kind of the question period of it. I'll turn it back over to you. It's been a pleasure talking with you, Jose. Hope to see you again. But Tim, back over
I
to
love
you.
it. Absolutely.
Jose, tell us about your current work, how folks can get a hold of you, what services you provide. Just let the audience know those things.
No, yeah, absolutely. I just want to drop one more thing,
Yep.
if I may.
Yeah.
Folks, it's not, you don't have to be in a leadership position either to have an effect. You can lead up, right? And so you can highlight certain things to your leadership to help move the ball. Okay. They will appreciate that because they are very busy and sometimes they don't have the lens that you do. So you can also lead up to help move the organization. It takes both sides to make an improvement. But my website is the cnrgroupllc.com. You can reach me there, book an appointment. I'm on social media. You can DM me. You can give me a call. I am open as long as I have a time slot available. I will be more than happy to meet with you. And like I said, I am happy to help people wherever they're at, meet them wherever they're at. And I don't mean necessarily location, but their situation. And let's build a plan to move forward and make sure that you leave the legacy that you want to do for your family and your loved ones.
Well, we appreciate you. I tell you what, I really got to know you and appreciate you when we were in the war zone, and your commitment to,
Yeah, that was
getting
last week, right?
time flies. It's crazy. But your commitment to the Lean Six Sigma project and then to further educational advancement, you are an inspiration to many people. So we are honored to have you on JD and the Brain.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Look forward to doing it again.
So, Tim, I always like to ask you the last question. What are we going to do next week?
Same thing we do every week, trying to take over the business world. We learned about promotion and nomination today from Dr. Jose, and We're going to take this and put it in our belt and even be better for next week. So thank you guys. We're glad you were with JD and the Brain. We will talk to you next week.
Support the mission. Align your team. Build capability. Leverage Teaming Plus for alliances. Because performance doesn't happen by accident. This has been JD and the Brain.